questions? Any questions in the back? Right. The question is, the statement was that there's an author who lives nearby, Charles Shields, who wrote an unauthorized biography of Harper Lee, and he didn't get cooperation. How did I get cooperation? I just worked really long and hard on it, and I spent a lot of time. I wrote Miss Alice quite a few letters, and I kind of courted her with books. I knew she was a student of history, so I sent a bunch of stuff. And Joy and Michael Brown have never spoken publicly about their connection to Harper Lee or about their gift. And when Harper Lee wrote that essay for McCall, she did not name them. She talked about them, but she didn't name them. And I just, I wrote letters. One thing about having a documentary is I had a 20-minute cut, so I could sort of walk around and say, here's my calling card, here's what I'm up to. So most people seemed to really like what I was doing, and it was easy for Miss Alice to see that the treatment was respectful. So she and I had a long in-person meeting, and it was delightful. And then I said, would it be all right if I talked to you on camera? And to my surprise, she said, sure, come back tomorrow. So I hired a crew and went back. And Joy and Michael was a 2-year deal, and they live in New York, so I would drop by and visit them and bring them books. And for a while, those interviews were done for posterity, and they said we did the interviews, and they were supposed to be kept until Harper Lee leaves this earth, which of course has not happened. And then they relaxed their feeling about it, and we changed the terms of the interview. So I think because I got in and stayed in for so long, I didn't push it. I didn't ambush anybody. I didn't misrepresent anything. In fact, I was sort of very forthcoming about what I was doing, and felt perfectly fine showing it to people. So that's how it happened. I'm really proud of getting Miss Alice. Yeah.
So obviously there's like a level of trust that develops.
Right.
How long was this period of time?
I didn't ever work, because I have a family to support and a mortgage. I never got to work on this exclusively. So I worked on it over a period of 3 years. And so, I do other jobs to make some money, to hire a crew, to go back. And so I kept my hand in all this time. So I do think the amount of time I stayed in was fortuitous, Okay,
so my follow-up question is, when people allow you access to somebody who is extremely private, do they just need to trust what you're going to put in there, or do they get a preview?
Well, I gave them a preview before they agreed to talk to me. I mean, what I showed Miss Alice and Michael and Joy Brown were sort of the Scout, Atticus, and Boo sections that had been built, and the civil rights section. So they had a pretty good sense of how this was going. But yeah, they had a friendship. They had a close friendship with someone who can't stand reporters. Now Harper Lee famously sends back requests with "hell no" written across the top of the letter. So they had a very long, deep friendship to protect, and I was very respectful of that. I mean, I waited. I did not push. They had a couple of conversations with Nell themselves. Miss Alice never asked her sister's permission, but that's the way those Lee girls are, I guess. So, in the back, you had a question?
Yeah, from the time you started working on this until now, did your feelings change about her, and what most surprised you as you delved into this?
Did everyone hear that? What most surprised me when I did this, and how my feelings changed about her? The surprise was not any one thing. It was that everybody had something different to say about the novel, and I would sort of be packing up and rounding and coming around to my 22nd interview with somebody, and it's like, what can John Meacham tell me that I haven't heard before? Or what am I going to get from this person that I haven't heard before? Invariably, I always found something new, and whether it was, Roseanne saying, it's about parenting, or Wally talking about teaching it. I mean, everybody did have some connection to it that resonated deeply for them and that I actually hadn't heard before. The other thing I found completely fascinating was, as you can see, I asked everyone to read from the novel, and I told them in advance I would like them to read a favorite passage. And there were hardly any duplications, which I think also tells you something about the novel. But one funny aside is Mark Childress, who I did very early on, who I think is really fantastic in this, read Stand Up, Miss Jean Louise, Your Father's Passing. He did it beautifully, but of course when Oprah read it, I'm like, see you, Mark. And to answer your second question, is my feelings about, when I started this, I found it impossible to believe, like some of these novelists, and anyone that wrote like that would just stop or could just stop, you know, because so many people write to make sense of their lives, and they write because they have to, and anybody that wrote that beautifully. But now I think I understand it more. And I think in the beginning I just didn't understand it and I couldn't really comprehend it. Now I think I understand it and I respect it. I have a lot of respect, not just for the incredible novel that she wrote, but what she did with her life afterward. Sir, in the back.
Did you ever run across her editors, the people who worked with her? I mean, you talked in the film about how there was a process that pulled together a lot of the sort of short bursts of creative writing that she did. So I'm just wondering who it was that, I mean, everybody needs an editor.
Right. Well, her editor, the question is about who it was that was her editor and what that process, the editor was Tay Hohoff, who wrote that little essay about how the novel came together. And what's kind of extraordinary about that relationship is Tay Hohoff, the manuscript comes in, Tay Hohoff reads it and says to her bosses, I would like to be detached from all other work just to work on this, which can you imagine that happening today in any publishing house? But that's how it was. And Tay Hohoff only worked on that with Harper Lee for, I think, at least 1 year solidly. I can't prove that it was 2, but I know that for 1 she worked on nothing else. Unfortunately, Lippincott, which is the publisher, was purchased by HarperCollins at some point. I mean, it had several other ownerships. Absolutely no correspondence is left or any notations, and it's just, I mean, when you think about what people do with their archives and their clippings and their files, it's just very sad to think about. In the back?
I just loved your movie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm wondering what your distribution plan is.
I'm talking to a distributor, which is good, and it's being shopped for a broadcast, and I'm waiting to hear about that. So things seem to have started to happen a little bit.
So it won't be in movie theaters?
Oh, I think if this distributor thing happens, I think it'll be in a few theaters, and it will also be available on DVD. So that's kind of the plan. I don't think it's going to open wide anywhere, but I think it would show in a few cities. So, in the middle there, you.
I know that the idea that Truman Capote had written parts of this, as far as I can tell. But I also know that there was a film which explored his in cold blood and suggested that she might in fact have done the opposite and have provided him with a great deal of written support and help with that. And I wonder if you have any
I have an opinion about that, and I think you can make a greater case that Harper Lee had more to do with In Cold Blood than he had anything to do with To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, we know he is the basis for Dill Harris, and we hear from Joy that he only read it once, and we know from Miss Alice that he really wasn't very generous about it as life went on. But if you go to the New York Public Library, which I had, Truman Capote's papers are available for research, and what happened when they went to Kansas is at the end of every day, Nell typed up the notes from their research for that day, and it's in her voice and her writing. And so there are some amazing descriptions of what's going on there that you can find in Cold Blood. They aren't verbatim, but you can find phrases and sentences that really come from Nell's notes. So yeah, I think you can make a greater case that her imprint on In Cold Blood is easy to find if you're looking for it.